Today's reading starts a little later than where I'm going to start reading. This is the second Sunday in Ordinary Time and is the account of the calling of the first disciples as told in John's Gospel. So starting to read chapter 1, verses 35 instead of the set reading of 43. The next day, John was standing there again with two of his disciples when he saw Jesus walking by. "There is the Lamb of God," he said. The two disciples heard him say this and went with Jesus. Jesus turned, saw them following, and asked them, "What are you looking for?" They answered, "Where do you live, Rabbi?" This word means teacher. "Come and see," he answered. It was then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So they went with him and saw where he lived, and spent the rest of the day with him. One of them was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. At once he found his brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah." This word means Christ. Then he took Simon to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "Your name is Simon, son of John, but you will be called Cephas." This is the same as Peter and means a rock. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Come with me." Philip was from Bethsaida, the town where Andrew and Peter lived. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one whom Moses wrote about in the book of the law, and whom the prophets also wrote about. He is Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth." "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," answered Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, he said to him, "Here is a real Israelite. There is nothing false in him." Nathanael asked him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you when you were under the fig tree before Philip called you." "Teacher," answered Nathanael, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "Do you believe just because I told you I saw you when you were under the fig tree? You will see much greater things than this." And he said to them, "I am telling you the truth. You will see heaven open and God's angels going up and coming down on the Son of Man." No surprise at all that in John's Gospel, here we have so much information condensed into such a small amount of text. He is combining the best of what Mark and Matthew say and also what Luke says in different ways. It's interesting. The phrase is repeated, "Come and see." And the quality of discipleship is also summed up in another big theme of John's: follow and remain, which is a calling for all of us in terms of that first encounter with God and then remaining like those first two disciples who went with Jesus and stayed with him. Different people experience God coming into their lives, and as a result, they go and tell other people about it. Sometimes people respond immediately. Sometimes, like Nathanael, there is an inherent prejudice. There is well, that can't be of any use whatsoever. There's an amusing aside, actually, that Nathanael's Hebrew name is God has given. And like lots of people who believe they're God's gift to people, Nathanael would have none of it, initially at least. But Nathanael is won over because of Jesus saying, "I saw you under the fig tree," which for some commentators is a reference from Micah about how on the day of the Lord, people will be under a fig tree at peace. And Nathanael has that vision. So people come to Jesus. And Peter, given that new name, is again an example, because when you come into the presence of God, when you have an experience of God and you meet with God, you are a new creation, and so a new name. As often happened in the Old Testament, Abraham becomes Abraham, Jacob becomes Israel. You're a new creation, a new name. The nature of discipleship and also the big picture of what Jesus is going to do. Going back again to Jacob, the disciples that are so far gathered with Jesus are told that they'll see greater things than just predictions. They'll see in Jesus a bridge between heaven and earth, that vision that Jacob had of angels going up and down on a ladder, a connection between this existence and the cosmic reality of God. And Jesus in John's Gospel is that person. But always, Jesus responds, always, most of the time, to people with that question: what are you looking for? What do you seek? And he says to them, come and see. Because there is really no sense at which Jesus is performing one act, doing a magic trick that convinces people, saying something utterly profound which convinces them and people can return to. Jesus says, come and be with me. Come and abide. Spend your life with me. Rest in my arms and my strength. And this is the nature of an encounter with God. We tend to use language like that, an encounter with God or experience of God, as if it's a one-off and tremendous event. And certainly, for myself included, that can be the case. Something that is so utterly life-changing, an experience that you never ever forget, and that whenever you think of it, a warmth comes back and a joy from the experience that you've had. That can be the way. But of course, that's just us allowing God to burst into our lives. The reality is that God is with us all the time, and God made us. It's not an intrusion, it's not an invasion, it's not a new revelation. It's an awakening to what was already there. Every single person that has ever existed and ever will is created by God. We know the biology, or we understand some of the biology, of how human beings are created. But as with all acts of creation, with all sparks of creation, God is at the center of that. Everything that exists, that grows and develops, is born of that creative spark of God. We know from physics that systems don't exist in a vacuum. There must be some energy, there must be some force behind things before they can grow and before they can move and develop. And God is that force, and we are created by God and owned by God. The reality is not that we need to invite God into our lives, but that we need to stop thinking of reality as reality. That this life, this simple movement between meals and day and night and sleep and work, is all we are. For we are God's children, made from the dust of the stars, and always and forever held in God's strong arms. We have will, we have intellect, we have minds, which can decide that that isn't the reality, that what we see around us is what is true, what we can see and touch and smell is truth, and everything else is mere fantasy. This is the scientific revelation, apparently. But if you talk to or read about, I've never talked to scientists about these things, if you read about the frontiers of science, you'll understand that reality is a very shaky concept. And what you are hearing me say now is probably not what I mean to say in my head. What you perceive as being the world around you is probably not what I see around me. We can agree on some things. This is a house, this is a car, this is a road. But ultimately, and certainly at a quantum level, there's really no sense of reality being the same thing. The more you dive into the advanced frontiers of science, the less we know, the less we can understand. That's not to say that God is some mystery far out there. Far from it. It actually opens our minds and frees us to the truth that reality is just a concept. There are no absolutes in terms of our perception, because it is precisely that, a perception of creation. What is eternal What is always and always with us is the presence of God. And our journey in life, whether we're called by somebody else who knows God, or whether we experience it through ourselves or through the Spirit, is to understand that God is always with us and always has been. It is not an intrusion. It is, as I say, an awakening. I always think of it in terms of coming home. It's where we were always meant to be, in the arms of the God who made us and the God who loves us. Now that cannot be extrapolated into how our lives will pan out, into what joys and sadnesses we will experience in this version of reality. But one thing remains: God is with us, and that same God is a God of love. There can be, in the living in God's world, any room for prejudice or division, any room for unkindness or things that do not show love and care. When Jesus said to his disciples, "Come and see," well, what did they see? They saw love for all people. They saw a person with no prejudice, a person who loved all and valued all, and came to tell everybody that the God who made them was close and real and available always, and that an encounter with that God is one of unbounded joy, a time when one's heart can truly be warmed. And this is good news for us and for others, and it is inevitable that when you experience something so wonderful, you want to tell other people about it.